Good morning to all of you, and Merry Christmas. It's great to see you all. Yeah, are you all ready for Christmas? Wow. Some of you are ahead of the game on this thing. Well, I mean, we have a lot of time left, right? Okay, well, and one thing before I start my message, if you haven't already gotten a letter from me, hopefully it will make it to your mailbox soon, but I know that because we really are close to Christmas, and then right after Christmas is the end of the year, and I know many of you are so gracious in the gifts, the year-end gifts that you give, and so just send out a letter just with some more information and just reminding all of us. So if you haven't gotten that letter, you should very soon. So here we are, the last week of our Christmas series here. And a few weeks ago, right after Thanksgiving, I was hanging the Christmas lights. And I'm gonna move this here, or it would just bug me. I was hanging the Christmas lights outside of our house, and one of our little neighbor kids came over and started chatting with me, and we had this great conversation. We got into the depths of Christmas theology, right? And we were talking about what Christmas means and all of this stuff, and he loves Christmas, and so we were talking about it. And then all of a sudden he stopped and he got sidetracked because I had a chainsaw sitting on my workbench in there. And he goes, "I know what that is." And I go, "Really?" He goes, "That's a chopper for wood." And I was like, "Yes." And he goes, and he just so beautifully brought it right back to Christmas, right? It's like, chainsaw. He goes, "Santa used one of those to cut the very first Christmas tree." I was like, I'm not familiar with that story, but like maybe so. And so then we started, and I said, "So are you looking forward?" Because he says, "Oh, yes." And so then I had this great question. I said, "So what is your favorite holiday?" And he goes, "My birthday." Just with exuberance, like right in our, and I was just like, I didn't see that one coming. And when he said that, like one of the things that hit me was like, he has an exuberance for his birthday that as adults, we kind of lose over time. Have you noticed that? Like it's like, it's just kind of a reminder I'm getting older or something. He then did tell me later, he thinks that Jesus's favorite holiday is Christmas because that would be his birthday. And we talked about that a little bit and went through that. But just seeing his exuberance for life and Christmas and his birthday and everything, just, have you ever noticed this, how as adults, as we go through life, we can kind of become more guarded about some of those things that bring us great joy, things that we would be excited about, little things, big things, birthdays, whatever it is. We can kind of lose that enthusiasm that sometimes you see with little kids. Ever find yourself saying this or saying it to someone else? Like where you say, "Now don't get your hopes up too much," right? And you're like, "Why do we say that?" Well, because you might get disappointed. I would hate for you to get your hopes up and just get all excited and then be disappointed in that. But like we're kind of hedging our bet a little bit. We're guarding ourselves against something else, but in the process of guarding ourselves from it, it's like we miss out on the potential of something. Or have you ever had a moment where there was something going on? Maybe it was, something funny, something that you wanted to do or whatever, but you held back because you're just like, I don't want to risk the possible embarrassment of this. And maybe it's a big thing, maybe it's a little thing. And you just found yourself holding back. As I thought about it, sometimes joy slips past us at moments. Just especially as we get older, we have certain experiences and we become a little bit more guarded or protective. There is a movie that my wife absolutely loves, a Christmas movie, and it has a character in it that does not have this problem. Y'all have seen the Christmas movie Elf? How many of you have seen Elf? Okay, yes, my wife loves this movie. And I was thinking about it, Elf, and if you haven't seen the movie, you'll Well, do whatever you want. You can go see a movie or not. It grows on you after, 20 years or however long it's been out. But Elf in this show, he's so naive, and yet there's this quality that he really does have that is worth noting. He has this quality of always risking disappointment or embarrassment to not let joy slip past. He'll risk it if it means the possibility of experiencing some joy. And I think that's actually a really important quality. There's something that shouldn't be missed on us. In the movie, he assumes everybody wants to have fun. Like, he makes all of these assumptions that in a way, it really is kind of an endearing quality. Like, he just thinks that everybody wants to have fun, that everybody needs a hug, that everybody could use a compliment. I love, there's one scene in the movie where he's walking down New York, the street in New York, and there's a coffee shop that says world's greatest coffee, like every other coffee shop in New York. And he's like, world's greatest coffee. And he just bolts into the place and goes, congratulations, everybody, right? Because you've got the world's greatest coffee. And just everyone's just like, who are you? And it's just like, but he doesn't care. Like, he's gonna hand out a compliment, right? He believes that everybody needs joy. And I think he's right about that. I think that that's like part of the Christmas story, that there's something there. And yet I wonder how often some of us let joy slip by, that we miss something that maybe God would want us to have or experience in all of this. Have you ever realized this? Have you ever realized that we can actually protect ourselves from joy? You ever thought about that? And it's understandable because of all those things that we've experienced. It's so different than my little neighbor kid who hasn't had some of those experiences where he's faced those disappointments or maybe hurts or whatever. But in a weird way, we can take those and use them to block out one thing we don't want, but maybe keep us from another thing. But what I want to say is the Christmas story itself is a story about joy, and a joy that's meant to be experienced. We're going to be looking in the book of the Gospel of Luke this morning. So if you want to pull out Luke, and we'll mostly be in chapter 1, but I want to look at one verse here in chapter 2. So look with me at Luke chapter 2, just one verse here. And this is a conversation when the angel is talking to the shepherds. Look at verse 10. Here's what the angel says. I bring you good news that will cause what? Great joy for all the people, right? Christmas is meant to be a gift that will bring joy, and not just joy, great joy. And I guess what I want to say is, when you protect yourself from pain, you might just be robbing yourself of joy. Not always, but sometimes. And I want to look at that this morning, because as we head into the heart of the Christmas season, there's something for us out of the Christmas story that we should pay attention to, because it's such a dominant part of the Christmas story, this idea of experiencing joy here. And you see it just throughout, from shepherds to angels to wise men, this idea of joy that needs to be experienced and expressed and passed on. And so I want to make 2 points this morning. And after I make those 2 points, I want to just offer some really practical application. So here's the first point that I want to make this morning. And it's this. Joy is too good to let it slip by. It really is. The joy that God has for us is too good to just let it slip by. But it's easier, it can slip by easier than we realize. And we see this in the story that occurs with Mary and Elizabeth at the beginning. So if you think about Mary and Elizabeth is Mary's aunt. And of course, with Mary, she has this aunt and uncle, and she's gonna, in the Christmas story, and we'll see it here in a moment, she's gonna go down and visit them. But we understand why she's going to go visit them, right? This angel comes and talks with Mary and explains, you're pregnant and you're going to have the Son of God. Like, it's going to be this amazing thing. And then we pick up the story. What does Mary immediately do after this? Flip back to Luke chapter 1 and look at verse 39. So just as soon as the angel is done talking with her, here's what it says in verse 39. And at that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea. She heads off. And part of the reason is, right, when we think about it, because here's where joy wants to slip by, where joy wants to fade. It's gonna be the rumor mill, and it's gonna be all the gossip, and it's gonna be the scandal. Here's this young teenage girl who's not married yet, and she's gonna be pregnant, and people aren't gonna understand this and go through all of this stuff. And so we shouldn't be surprised that she, hurries off. But it's not like she just hurries off to, a little short distance. Like when she hurries off to the hill country in Judea, it's not like she's living on, Tangerine and hikes back up into the Tortolitas or something for a mile. If you could see it on a map, I think we've got a map here. She has to travel a long ways. In fact, the hill country down to Judea would have been 90 miles away. And this is before there were, cars and vehicles and this sort of thing. Not only that, think about this. This is in her first trimester. So, ladies, think about going on a 1 mile hike from Tangerine into the Tortolitas in your first trimester when you've got morning sickness and not feeling good. Think about 90 plus miles, right? I bet when she showed up at her aunt and uncle's, she wasn't feeling super refreshed and ready to go. She's kind of getting away here in this moment. What's interesting too is when she shows up at her aunt and uncle's, there's kind of a parallel thing that her Aunt Elizabeth is going through as well. Her aunt and uncle are much, much older than her. We know from the text that they were long past childbearing age and that they were unable to have a child through all that time. And in the same way that there would have been kind of a social stigma that Mary knew that was kind of coming and she'd have to deal with, there was also a social stigma in the first century that if you didn't have a child, if you got married and went through those years and didn't have a child, it was the questions okay, did you do something and God is punishing you? Or are you, why would God allow this to happen? There'd be all of these things. In fact, Elizabeth describes this is kind of this thing that she carried, and what she carried was this disgrace that she carried. And you can imagine all those years of carrying that kind of disgrace and then maybe reaching a point where it was kind of behind them. But what's interesting in this story is an angel then comes to Zechariah, right, her husband, and says, guess what? Good news of great joy, you're gonna have a baby now, right? And you would think that the immediate response would be yes, finally, this is wonderful, right? And this angel describes this to Zechariah, and his reaction is I don't know. He's not excited about this thing at all. And at first we might go, well, why not? But when you think about it, right? There's reasons why that could be. And Elizabeth, who you'd think would be super excited, look at her response. Well, actually start in verse 13. Here's where the angel describes this to Zechariah. Look at verse 13. It says, but the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you're going to call him John. He will actually become John the Baptist, right? What an amazing thing that's happening in this family. They're gonna have Jesus and John the Baptist in their family, right? Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you're to call him John. He will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. This is so amazing. And Zechariah's no. And then Elizabeth's response, if you drop all the way down to verse 24, she becomes pregnant, and here's how she responds. Verse 24, after this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and for 5 months remained in seclusion. Wow, like this is the thing that she's wanted for so long. This was the thing that was absent that she described as this disgrace that she carried. And now it's gone. And she goes into seclusion. You can just kind of feel hope fading. But we can understand why, right? Like, what if Zechariah got it wrong, right? And just like, and we tell everybody, and then it'll be like, oh, like, you didn't have a baby before, and now you're saying you will, and you don't. Or we don't know the circumstances. Maybe she got pregnant before, maybe several times, and miscarried every time. And now she's pregnant. It's just like, I don't want to tell anybody. Because then I'm going to go through that whole, what if I miscarry again, right? What you can just feel like the guarding of disappointment in there. And I bet every one of you has moments where maybe, like, what's the thing that you have hope for or excitement for that you'd long for, but you're guarded against it? Is there a relationship? Maybe it's with one of your kids or an ex or someone in your family, and boy, there's been all of this tension, and you just have all of this hope. Like you would love for that relationship to find some level of healing, and maybe you see an inkling of it moving in a good direction, and you're just like, no, I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to put myself out there. Because what if I get hurt? Or maybe you do want a child. Maybe that's your exact situation, and you're just like, oh, so longing, hopeful, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. Maybe it's a change in your career. Maybe like what is the thing that you find yourself maybe secretly saying? Don't get too excited about this, right? Like we have a way where sometimes we can miss the beauty of the joy that maybe God is wanting to infuse in our lives. And we can understand why. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't want us to have joy, even in the midst of that. Which leads to my second point in all of this that I think is so important that we see come out of this story. And it's this: joy is too good not to share. Joy is too good not to share in this. What happens next in the text, right? You have these two ladies, and we understand all the reasons why joy could slip by. But I love what happens next in this story. This is the turning point in the story. Look at verse 39 again here. And I'm going to read through more of this story. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to the town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. And here's where the whole story turns, right? When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice, she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her," right? All of a sudden, there's kind of this whole different experience around what has happened here. And it's interesting, when they come together in this moment, there are two patterns that just stand out in the Christmas story that I want you to see, that get back to this idea that like joy is too good not to be shared, that becomes important. The first one is this. When you look at the Christmas story, there is a kind of language that Mary and Elizabeth use when the story unfolds, or I should say the absence of it. Mary hears from this angel, and the angel talks about this is filled with joy. The angels are using a lot of joy-filled language in this, but Mary's not. In fact, her response, how she talks about this is here's her first response, right? It is, may God's word be fulfilled. There it is, right? How many of you ladies, like maybe when you were first pregnant and you got the pregnancy test and you were telling one of your closest friends and you were just like, well, I'm pregnant. May God's word be fulfilled, right? It's just like, it's just like, I'll be faithful to this plan you've got going, God, but are you sure about this? Like this is like her faithfulness is enduring, but it's not filled with joy. There's not something in the language that's pointing to joy in this. Same with Elizabeth, right? Secluded for 5 months. There's this kind of, and even in the story, talks about, and I've been dealing with this disgrace. But then the language all changes when they share their story. But the joy was still there, right? Like when Mary gets this is amazing, right? Like, you're gonna carry the Son of God into this world. That is amazing. But it's hard for her to get to the joy of it until she's with her aunt. And I think there's something that her aunt, right, maybe struggles with. And when she sees her young niece, like there's something that just helps her get in touch with this. And you see this next pattern that is within the Christmas story. And it's this: joy is best experienced with. It is meant to be passed on. God, right? God's gonna send his son into the world, and God shares it with the angels, and the angels share it with the shepherds, and the shepherds share it with the countryside. And Mary and Elizabeth are going to share it with each other. In fact, friends, when you think about the gospel itself, it is hard. Just look at the pattern throughout the entire New Testament. It is always about sharing, like it's something that just, like, as you get it, as you understand it, there's a part of it you just, like, you want to share this because there's something good about it. It's why it's called good news, right? That idea of sharing. And this is where it begins with the birth of Jesus in this. There's a kind of joy that's starting with God, to angels, to shepherds, to wise men, to nieces and aunts, that is meant to be shared, right? Joy is best experienced with. And you see this beautiful pattern that occurs in this. And that leads to this idea that if we don't want joy to slip past, we have to understand that there's something that we offer one another that helps us capture that joy in this. And so let me offer a couple of, just a few things about application to this here this morning. And the first one is this: don't protect yourself from disappointments in a way that keeps you from joy. If you find yourself protecting yourself, hedging something that's actually keeping you from joy, don't let that happen, right? Don't allow that, what would have happened if, Mary wouldn't have gone to her aunt's? What if she would have gone someplace else? What if her aunt in that moment wouldn't have shared her story with Mary in that? There would have been a loss in that. Here in this last season, I have ended up doing far more funerals than I have done in most seasons. And not too long ago, I was doing a funeral for a family that really had no church connection. And as a church, we got to just be a breath of fresh air and just provide something for them to do the funeral. And so I was meeting with the family and friends, and it was a large group. I bet it was close to 15 people that I was sitting down with, friends or family and extended family and several close friends. And they were working on trying to plan what the funeral would be, and they just and I'm trying to work with them, and they just couldn't nail down anything with what would be in the funeral. So I started kind of trying to probe what's paralyzing them in this thing. And it was that they felt this terrible burden of, they didn't know how to answer the question of why, that they had lost this man in the prime of his life. And he was a husband and a father and a brother and a friend and a son, and just in the prime of his life. And they couldn't, They felt this burden that like the funeral somehow had to answer this big existential question as to why. And they just, and it was such a heavy meeting at that moment. And so at first I was just like, so let me lighten the load. Like the funeral doesn't have to answer that question in that. Like it's okay to just move forward and that didn't help them. Like you could tell, it's just the weight of it. And so I switched gears. I said, so because I didn't know him, let's not worry about planning the service just this moment. Will you help me understand him? And I said, tell me about his humor. When did he make you laugh? And they giggled just a little bit, but nothing. And I said, okay, tell me about, did he ever embarrass you? Like in some way that made you laugh? And then all of a sudden, like 3 or 4 of them just started laughing about these goofy things that he would do that just made them laugh. And they were all different stories. And when they realized they all had different stories, then they started telling more stories. And then the laughter just rolled, and then the tears. And like there were moments where there were tears and laughter at the same time. There were a couple of them that were laughing so hard like they couldn't even talk. And then they would cry. And then there was something about finding the joy of this person that just, like it lightened the load. And yet, like there was this thing where they were struggling to move forward, in part because it just felt like it's not okay for us to experience joy right now because we lost this person, and somehow out of respect or mournfulness. And I was like, you need to get in touch with the joy. And that'll make you cry, but it'll make you laugh. Like you need to go through, what would he want you to be experiencing right now? And then oh my gosh, he'd want, yeah, there you go. And it was the vulnerability that they just needed to express. Joy brings about a kind of vulnerability that is sweet and precious and that we need. And it's a vulnerability that sometimes little kids and movie characters called elves seem to understand sometimes really well. And so did Mary, and so did Elizabeth. So what is it that you're protecting yourself from that maybe you need to let your guard down a little bit and let yourself experience some joy? Second point of application in all of this, and these next two really go with that idea of joy is just too good not to share. And the first point of application is this. Encourage joy in others. Be like really deliberate in encouraging joy in others. When Mary walks through that door, don't miss how Elizabeth responds, right? The text says she exclaims, right? In fact, it uses this Greek word that means to like shout, and shout with volume, like it means volume and emotional intensity, right? This is a emotionally charged word. Like you're shouting something with lots of energy and you're loud in this thing, right? And what's also interesting is if Luke would have just used that word, we could have pictured what Elizabeth would, like her demeanor in that moment. But just to make sure, to push it a little bit farther, when Luke writes out what happens here, he uses another little Greek word, and you'll know the meaning of this word probably without me even telling you at first. And it's the word megas, like in mega or magnify, right? Which just amplifies a word in Greek that is already an amplifying kind of word, like a double amplification. It's just like, and what she's amplifying, don't miss this. It's encouragement. It is celebrating the thing that Mary has left home over and doesn't know what to do. Like, it's just like she's infusing this kind of encouragement to help Mary experience joy around this. And she's specific about it. She points to this kind of encouragement. Mary, your faith, there's something beautiful and exciting about your faith. You know, back in the line, you're like, okay, well, I hope, I'll be faithful to God's word in this, right? And Elizabeth has this way of putting this energy and joy to this thing that just changes the whole thing. Be intentional about encouraging others. So let me ask you this, like, who is it in your life this Christmas season that could use a little bit of encouragement? Who is that? I think about that family I was sitting with. They all needed some encouragement. But there was something beautiful about not them just thinking of stories that were precious to just them. Something really special happened when they started sharing those stories with one another. They started encouraging one another. They started telling stories. And then the stories just went to places about like how this individual thought of them and how this individual loved them so much and how they were so good to this person. Like there was something about like the joy factor started just rising up. And friends, if joy can be found and encouraged in others in the midst of planning a funeral for someone you love, then joy can be found anywhere at any time. And that's the Christmas story. We need the Christmas story and think about the Christmas story. The Christmas story is the joy that God has come. It is the story of God's care, God's grace, God's redemption, and God's affection for you and for me. That's good news, and we need that good news to be resonating in our heart all of the time. In fact, we need it the most in hard times and difficult times. And this Christmas season, you're gonna have somebody in your life, and they're gonna be going through something. And what if you were the person who intentionally, like we're gonna be getting together with all these family gatherings and all of this stuff at different moments. And I know, and maybe you're an introvert and you're just like, this is the season, you're just like, But even in that, maybe there's a moment where you're just like, there's gonna be that other person and and I know what they're going through. What would happen if you became intentional about encouraging something that would bring joy to them? Like, what a blessing that would be. The last point of application here is simply this: find someone to share your joy with. I think about Mary and the fact that she shows up at her aunt's house. Man, she could not have picked a better place to go, could she? Like, she knew where to go and who she could share whatever little bit of joy that maybe she had and was wondering about with all of her doubt. She picked the right place to go. Find someone you can share your joy with. Maybe it's something like you're hesitant with. Maybe it's something you're not hesitant with. But don't let it just slip by. Share it with somebody else, because joy really, it's too important to not share. Be intentional about reaching out and finding those ways to connect with us. Because when Mary does that, it changes everything in the flow of the story. This is where now Mary and Elizabeth start to use the language that the angels have been using from the very beginning. And part of that is because they found the right person to share their joy with. Who's the person that when you share your story with them, it brings joy out? Who's the person that just lights you up? Find that person. Be intentional about that. I told you earlier, my wife loves the Christmas movie Elf, and she really does. But she doesn't like to just watch it by herself. She can, and she has. But she has this thing that she loves to do every Christmas season, and that is she wants to gather her little family together, right? Because our kids, are in school and work. And so this is the time of year that they'll show up and live back in the house again, right? So she's got her whole little family together for this season. And rather than just watch Elf all by herself and giggle and laugh through the whole thing, she wants all of us to be there and giggle and laugh through the whole thing. And we mock the movie through the whole thing. And she puts up with it and loves it and just a thing. And this year she's like, when are we gonna watch Elf? Let's watch Elf. And we're all busy and doing that? And she's like, no, we've got to do. And we're just like, well, like I don't know. It's like another Christmas movie. And she's like, well, no, don't go down that Hallmark thing that it is. And we're just like, because she watches all the Hallmark Christmas movies. And we're just like, so she's like, and of course, we all know Elf is the movie she wants to watch, right? And we're just like, well, like, a different one. And she's like, okay, well, what kind of Christmas movie? And we're like, I don't know, like an action adventure Christmas movie. And we're like, we got her on this one, right? She goes, okay. How about Die Hard? Die Hard's a Christmas movie. Yes, there you go. Yes, you should have joined us because last night we as a family watched Die Hard 1, the Christmas movie, right? And Angie was so happy because she had us all together and we found joy together as we were watching. Maybe it's going to turn into a new family tradition. Who knows? We're going to get together on Christmas Eve and watch Die Hard together, right? But yeah, and it was just something. And as we started doing that, I was like, she's living out my sermon that I'm going to preach tomorrow, right? It's just like that. She just made a point that she could have done it by herself, but she didn't. And that's the Christmas story, isn't it? Shepherds don't stay by themselves, and the angels didn't. And wise men travel long distances, right? Because this story of a God who would come and be with us because of, right? Like he has such affection and love for you and for me that he had come to this world. That's a story that's just too good to keep to ourselves. And there's a joy in it that I want you to experience, and I want you to experience what it is to pass it on, because I have here's my theory. Joy becomes great joy when it's shared. When we have a kind of joy that we get to share and experience with someone else, that's when that joy turns into a great joy. And that's what those angels were saying about this Christmas story. So may this Christmas season you experience great joy, friends. Why don't you stand, and I'm gonna close this in prayer here this morning. Let me pray. Father, we thank you for the joy that you've just infused into our world, literally through your Son, Jesus Christ. And I pray that we would get to experience the joy of him in a way that would be passed on through us. We want to experience not just joy, but great joy. And we pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Have a great morning. See you Christmas Eve.